Any attempts by European leaders to convince the world of their commitment to achieving peace in Ukraine, are shattered by the facts. Today, on the 24th of February, the Press Bureau of the Russian Federation's Foreign Intelligence Service released an urgent statement concerning the plans of London and Paris to provide Kiev with nuclear weapons, or with the so-called dirty bomb, as well as the means for its delivery. In concrete terms, the discussion revolves around the covert transfer to Ukraine of relevant European components, equipment and technologies. This development of events clearly demonstrates that British and French leaders, who have been sidelined from the settlement process concerning the Ukrainian situation, have definitively lost all connection with reality. Russia possesses all the necessary capabilities to effectively repel such actions. However, we hope that in London and Paris there are still enough sensible and reasonable people who will be able to restrain their leaders from such inappropriate steps.
China remains the decisive enabler of Russia's war industrial machine. We have urged China many times in this chamber to stop supplying Russia with dual-use goods and material components that end up in the drones and other weapons used in Ukraine. China also remains one of the top importers of Russian oil. If China truly wants peace, it should immediately end exports of dual-use goods and stop purchasing Russian oil. The DPRK has transferred munitions and ballistic missiles to Russia for use in Ukraine, and since October 2024 has deployed thousands of DPRK troops to fight for Russia on the front lines. Most urgently, we once again call on both parties to stay at the negotiating table and, in a spirit of flexibility, compromise and a duty to protect and preserve the lives of their own citizens, to end this barbaric war once and for all.
Play a constructive role in the early political settlement of the crisis. Mr. President, just now, the U.S. representative in his statement once again slandered and smeared China. This is completely unacceptable. China is not Ukraine. China is not the creator of the Ukraine crisis, nor is it a party to it. China's stance on the Ukraine issue has been open and consistent, always advocating for a ceasefire and cessation of hostilities and insisting on promoting peace talks. The international community has witnessed China's efforts. We have not provided lethal weapons to any party in the conflict and have always strictly controlled the export of dual-use items. As a major global production, trade and consumption powerhouse, China maintains significant ties with Russia, Ukraine, Europe and the United States. I must also emphasize, and it is important to state, that for a considerable period of time now, the United States has consistently exploited various occasions to fabricate a multitude of baseless excuses and outright lies, persistently launching attacks and maliciously slandering China. This unequivocally constitutes naked political manipulation, with the explicit objective of inciting bloc confrontation and rivalry, thereby deliberately creating division and antagonism. We therefore once again strongly urge the United States to
Current European leaders, without any pretense or reservation, are openly and aggressively announcing their commitment to inflicting a strategic defeat upon Russia. They are subordinating to this objective their domestic and foreign policies as well as the entire economy of the European Union. Peace in Ukraine, its future, was barely mentioned in their speeches. Against this backdrop, Zelensky's hysterical remarks in Munich are hardly surprising. Funds for continuing the war are still being allocated, though in smaller amounts. Weapons are promised and supplied. But does this not mean that he is slowly being written off? Europe apparently is ready to give security guarantees to Ukraine only as long as the Kiev regime remains an enemy of Russia and continues the war. Zelensky doesn't need peace. He stated this directly in Munich. For him, the war is a political issue and simply a matter of survival. Mr. Chairman, Western countries, primarily European, have played a very disgraceful role since the very beginning of the Ukrainian crisis. These days, we are commemorating another anniversary of the state coup in Kiev. Let me remind you that it was the Europeans, specifically in 2013 and 2014, who orchestrated an unprecedented interference in the internal affairs of Ukraine. This intervention ultimately resulted in the unconstitutional removal from power of the country's legitimately elected president. It was none other than the Europeans who present themselves as the foremost democratic standard setters and the very fount of moral principles for what they termed the not always civilized, and more often outright authoritarian rest of the world, who brought to power in Ukraine a bloodthirsty regime of a neo-Nazi persuasion, granting it carte blanche to commit any and all crimes, thereby effectively encouraging his deliberate focus on the destruction of the Russian-speaking population. Throughout all these years, Western sponsors have not uttered a single word of condemnation for the truly blood-chilling attacks on innocent civilians, first in Donbass and then in other Russian regions. Since then, unprovoked Russian aggression against Ukraine has been placed at the very center of Western arguments. Anyone who attempts to speak the truth about the lawlessness that occurred in Donbass or about the current strikes on civilian infrastructure and residents of Russian regions, about the bloody Kursk operation, and especially to provide irrefutable evidence that the conflict was unleashed and provoked specifically by NATO, they are immediately labeled and dismissed as pro-Russian propagandists, and their voices are silenced. In Ukraine, people like this are driven out of their country, imprisoned, or simply killed. I am addressing my esteemed European colleagues. Who exactly is it that you are trying to deceive? Completely disregarding all the established facts and basic common sense, you have consistently, for all these years, been molding Zelensky into a heroic figure, and you are constantly highlighting peaceful aspirations that he has, in reality, never truly possessed. At the same time, you falsely attribute to Russia a lack of interest in peace and a clear intent towards escalation. Any attempts by European leaders to convince the world of their commitment to achieving peace in Ukraine, are shattered by the facts. Today, on the 24th of February, the press bureau of the Russian Federation's Foreign Intelligence Service released an urgent statement concerning the plans of London and Paris to provide Kiev with nuclear weapons, or with the so-called dirty bomb, as well as the means for its delivery. In concrete terms, the discussion revolves around the covert transfer to Ukraine of relevant European components, equipment and technologies. As an option, the French compact TN75 warhead from the M51.1 submarine-launched ballistic missile is being considered. It's quite telling that other Western capitals, it appears, are fully cognizant of the sheer magnitude of the recklessness being exhibited by London and Paris. Berlin, for instance, has explicitly refused to participate in this particular venture. I presume there's no need to remind anyone that such plans are not merely irresponsible and dangerous, but also unlawful, as they represent a direct breach of the first article of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. It is precisely for this particular reason that the individuals behind this entire venture are endeavoring to portray Kiev's acquisition of nuclear weaponry as solely the outcome of the Ukrainians' own indigenous development. This development of events clearly demonstrates that British and French leaders, who have been sidelined from the settlement process concerning the Ukrainian situation, have definitively lost all connection with reality. Russia possesses all the necessary capabilities to effectively repel such actions. However, we hope that in London and Paris there are still enough sensible and reasonable people who will be able to restrain their leaders from such inappropriate steps. The Ukrainians and their European sponsors have a long track record of perfidy and hypocrisy, beginning with the sabotage of the Minsk agreements, which, according to later admissions by European leaders, were nothing more than an attempt to gain time for the rearmament of the Ukrainian armed forces. Just as Security Council Resolution 222 was a dead letter to them, so last year's document 2774 does not serve their interest. The leaders of most European countries, as we see, consider themselves above Security Council resolutions, principles, and norms of international law. The vote that took place this morning in the General Assembly on the resolution prepared by Kyiv and European countries titled "In Support of Lasting Peace in Ukraine" is simply just another manipulation, an attempt to pull the wool over the eyes of representatives of the global South. It bears no relation to reality or a sustainable resolution of the conflict.
I need to say to members of this council that the allegation made by the representative of the Russian Federation is an outright lie. He says that we have lost touch with reality. It is he who has lost touch with reality. This is yet another piece of disinformation from the Russian Federation and a clear attempt to deflect attention from its ongoing, unprovoked and illegal invasion of Ukraine. I can categorically assure members of this council that the United Kingdom remains fully committed to its obligations under the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and to preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons. We are not providing and would not provide nuclear weapons or related capabilities to Ukraine.